If this simple part breaks and you guys don't notice, you could end up having to replace your entire engine. So, can I fix it? How difficult is it gonna be? Well, luckily enough, it's actually really simple, and I'm gonna show you step by step how to do it. Also, at the end of the video, I'm gonna tell you 4 very important things about the repair that, if you miss, it could end up costing you a lot of money. During the video, I'm also gonna show you exactly where this part usually fails and a side-by-side comparison of the new replacement part. Today we are replacing the water bypass pipe on a Toyota Hilux. Now this repair does also carry over to a number of different vehicles, so hopefully you still find the video useful. These are the tools and the parts that you're going to need. You finished writing it down? Okay, good. Big on! Let's get repairing. So the first thing we need to do is to drain the coolant from the radiator. Now, you'll notice my radiator has a quick release drain point, but if yours doesn't, then not to worry. You might just have to remove the lower radiator hose and then let it drain like that. You'll also notice that I'm catching the coolant in a clean container so that I can reuse this again later. But if you're going to put new coolant in, well then just catch it in some dirty old container and make sure you dispose of it correctly. While the coolant drains, we can remove the air intake pipe. Now, we do this by loosening the hose clamps at the throttle body and at the flexible pipe side. Once that's done, we can remove the 2 bolts holding the pipe onto the valve cover. Little tip here, preferably don't pull the vacuum pipe off the plastic side, that's the little nib that's got the plastic side on it. Rather, pull the pipe off the metal pipe side, and that's just in case you pull and then the plastic part breaks off and then you kind of buggered. Once the crankcase breather pipe is removed though, we can carefully pull off the flexible hose, unclip the intake pipe and set it aside on top of the motor. Next up, we unplug the wiring from the aircon pump, the camshaft timing control valve, and the crank angle sensor. After the plugs have all been unplugged, then we can unclip the wiring, support tabs, and unbolt and remove the plug support bracket. These are all mounted to the intake manifold, which will be removed later, and that is why we are removing all of this peripheral stuff. Again, we carefully remove more piping. Be careful when removing the piping though. Some of them have plastic fittings and you don't want to break these fittings and then have to repair another thing. So once that's done, unplug the throttle body wiring plug and head over to the firewall side and remove the wiring support brackets there. It's also a good idea to cover the intake with a clean rag. You don't really want stuff falling down there. Next up is to remove 2 coolant pipes from the throttle body manifold. If yours are stuck like mine, just work it slowly with a screwdriver and they'll eventually come off. Just take your time. We also remove the brake booster vacuum pipe and tuck it onto the manifold. Here I'm removing the fuel return line and the supply line. Now this was a bit tricky without the correct tool, but eventually I did manage to get it unclipped. So you guys might have to faff around a little bit, but I'm sure you'll get it done. To remove the throttle body, there are 2 nuts and 2 bolts that need to be unscrewed. Now, once loose, the throttle body should lift off fairly easily, but when you do this, just lift gently and slowly as to not damage the rubber gasket underneath. Once that's off, I'm going to take another rag and block off the opening. Also, be careful not to damage the wire mesh when covering this opening. You'll see that wire mesh there. Just be careful, guys. Now we need to unbolt and remove the intake manifold. Now, I have a question for you. Are you guys going to follow this video, or are you going to try do it without removing the intake manifold? Let us know in the comments. It's always interesting to hear different people's opinions. There are 5 easily accessible bolts along the top, which I'm taking loose right now. And there are 2 bolts underneath the manifold, which are somewhat hidden away, but they are still accessible. They're just a little bit more difficult to get to. Also notice that I'm not removing the bolts completely. I'm just cracking them loose for now. So here's a picture that shows the location of the 5 bolts on top and the 2 bolts at the bottom of the manifold. Now, it is possible to remove the lower bolts with a somewhat short extension, also without jacking the vehicle or without removing any of the wheels, which is always a plus. All you have to do is have pretty good aim, stick it in relatively deep and give it a good crack, and then you'll come right. Preferably also try not to drop any of your bolts. The second bolt is also removed with a somewhat short extension. To give you another view, the front lower bolt can also be seen through here. And the back lower bolt can be seen through this gap. Now that the lower bolts are removed, we can remove the top bolts and ease the manifold off the head. Now again, just be careful, there is a rubber gasket which you don't really want to damage. So just work the manifold out slowly and then you'll be good to go. I just want to pause the video here quickly and show you that there is another hose which needs to be removed before the manifold can be removed. It's a little bit tight to get a camera in and work in there at the same time. So here is a picture of the hose and it's between the manifold and the firewall. Here is another view of the short hose and the wire clamp that needs to be removed. Now, this is the water bypass pipe that we need to replace. And there are 2 places that it could be leaking. One of them being directly behind the thermostat housing, or at the other end where the small pipe usually cracks off or it breaks off completely. Now, to remove this pipe, we need to remove a support bracket at the back of the motor and 2 rubber hoses. It is very simple, just use a pair of pliers, squeeze the spring clamp and pull it up the hose. Then pull the hose off the plastic fitting. Now we can remove the two nuts which bolt the pipe onto the back of the thermostat housing and then pull the pipe off. Also, make sure to remove the old rubber gasket if it didn't come off with the pipe. I would really love your support, so if you have found the video useful so far, please like it by clicking the thumbs up button, and also please consider subscribing. It really does help me out. Now we can grab the new stainless steel pipe and install it. Before we do though, here is a side-by-side comparison of the old part, which is plastic, and the new part, which is stainless steel. The new part is still supplied by Toyota. It's an OEM part, and I think they changed from plastic to stainless steel pipes around the 2009, 2010 and onwards models. So here I'm sliding on a new gasket that has a very thin layer of RTV gasket maker applied to each side. Once that's on, slide the new pipe on and tighten it up. Something to keep in mind though, best practice would be to torque these nuts to the correct spec. However, I'm just going to use the good old finger torque test. You guys know how it goes. 2 turns back from stripped is pretty good. At the other end, bolt up the support bracket, tighten it up, slide on the 2 rubber hoses, and don't forget to put the clamps back on. As for the remainder of the repair, it's basically just the reverse of what you did when you were taking everything apart. Just make sure that all the gaskets are clean and not damaged before bolting everything back up. Also, if there is any more information that comes up, I'll leave it in the description, so make sure to check that out. And after completing this job, the new pipe is an excellent replacement part on the motor. So 4 important things that you don't want to forget. Number 1 is to reconnect that short vacuum hose between the back of the intake and the firewall. Number 2 is that when you are pulling off your rubber hoses, preferably don't pull them off the plastic fitting side, pull them off the metal fitting side, because the plastic fitting side is more likely to break than the metal side, and you don't want to end up having to repair something else. Number 3, and arguably the most important one, is don't forget to fill up the coolant system and check for leaks. Imagine driving down the road and you've done this repair that's worked out really well, and then you go and seize your engine. That's not going to be too good. And number 4, subscribe. Lastly, there are going to be other items that you need to service on your vehicle, and in this video, I'm going to show you exactly how. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Cheers.